All right, I think we're going to get started. Wow. Welcome, wonderful Jackson community, and welcome to Jackson, Dan Siegel. Come on out, Dan. Awesome. My name is Julia Heemstra, and I am the director of the Wellness Department at St. John's Medical Center. It is our distinct pleasure to have played a part in bringing Dan to this community. And it is an even greater pleasure to have done that in collaboration with the Teton County School District, GAP, and the Teton County Library. It seems fitting that Dr. Siegel's community presentation is about relationships and how they shape us, as this collaboration really has been a first in our community. Never before have the hospital, the school district, the library, and a nonprofit partnered in this fashion. Yeah. This afternoon, Dr. Siegel spoke to the entire student body at the Jackson Hole High School, tonight to a sold-out audience of community members with 256 people on the wait list, so congratulations for getting tickets. And tomorrow morning, he'll speak to the majority of the educators and the mental health professionals in our valley. There is truly no way that we could have reached this many people without working together. I want to humbly and deeply thank my partners in this endeavor. Connie Kimmerer, whose vision for wellness in this community, yes. Connie's vision for wellness in this community was the catalyst for the Teton Wellness Festival, which has now grown into this, our Words on Wellness speaker series. Thank you, Connie. And I also want to thank my other primary partners in this collaboration, Per Trudell from the Teton County School District, Carrie Kirkpatrick, yes, they deserve it. Carrie Kirkpatrick and Jessica Yeomans from GAP. Una Doherty and Pauline Towers-Dykeman from the Teton County Library. And last but certainly not least, my fabulous employees, Laura Kalari and Natalie Stewart. They are amazing. Yes! I also want to extend the deepest thanks to our CEO of St. John's Medical Center, Dr. Paul Beaupre, and our Hospital Foundation President, John Gettler. They have been critical in their support of this initiative. Dr. Siegel is almost indescribable, and I'm going to call him Dan. Dan is almost indescribable. His accomplishments are so vast. I asked him in the car ride over what I should talk about for him because literally his bio is pages long. But I wanted to note that perhaps most notably, he is an internationally renowned neuropsychiatrist and the author of numerous New York Times bestselling books. Some of his more recent works include Brainstorm, Mind, Mindsight, and his upcoming book, Aware. He is the executive director of the Mindsight Institute, a professor at the UCLA School of Medicine, and the founding co-director of the Mindful Awareness Research Center at UCLA. Please welcome Dr. Siegel, or Dan.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you for everyone who has been a part of hosting my coming here. It's been an incredible about 24 hours that I've been here, and I've already feel very welcomed by so many of you here, so thank you. And thank you all for coming. We are going to spend this evening talking about the power of relationships in our lives and what they mean for us personally, what they mean for us as community, what they mean for us globally. And we're going to begin with a little exercise that will just give you an experiential dive into the nature of relationships. And throughout the evening, we'll be coming back to the experience of this exercise. So what I need to ask you to do, first of all, is make sure your phones are off if you can, or just to buzz or whatever they do to just be on silent, because I want you just to immerse yourself in this experience. This is actually an exercise I did with all of the high school students this afternoon. So do any of you have kids who are in high school? Raise your hand if you do. Okay, so you can compare notes on what it's like, and I would really like you to know that. But every human being should be aware of what this experience can be like, and we'll be referring to it. So sit up straight, and all I'm going to ask you to do is just be aware of whatever arises in you, whatever happens in you. I'm going to say one word. I'll repeat it several times. Then I'm going to say another word. I'll repeat that word several times. Then we'll do a few other things, and then we'll share what that experience was like. Okay? No. 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 Yes. 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 Now try putting one hand on your chest, another hand on your abdomen, and put some gentle pressure. Just let yourself breathe nice and deeply. Just sense what that feels like. And now switch it out so the hand on your chest goes to your abdomen, the hand on your abdomen goes to your chest. Put some gentle pressure. Feel what that feels like. And now put it whichever way was most soothing for you. Okay, just put some gentle pressure there. And now you can leave your hands like that or put them down. We're going to now do a little survey of the group. Let's begin with the hand experience. How many of you felt that one way or the other, putting a hand on your chest and a hand on your abdomen was soothing in some way? Raise your hand really, really high. Okay, so take a look. It's the majority of people. How many of you felt that both were the same, left and right on the top? It didn't matter. Okay, just a handful. Okay, how many felt right on top was more soothing? Okay, and left on top? Okay, it's always the same. This is so interesting. If anyone's interested in a doctoral degree, you could figure that no one knows why that's the case, and it doesn't have to do with left-handedness or right-handedness as far as we can tell. So that's just an interesting thing you can always do to soothe yourself. Now let's go. How many of you felt a difference inside of you when I said no versus when I said yes? Raise your hand. Difference. Okay. So I'm going to begin on this side of the room and just shout out some words, a word that describes what the feeling was like. We'll begin with no. Just shout out a word, and I'll repeat it. Shame, tense, annoyed, shrinking tight, anxiety. What's that? empowered, okay? Up there, you can say too. Anger, fear, shock, defended, pressure, startling, guilt, ridiculous, you felt ridiculous, okay? Sad, traumatized, bad, and what was the word? A barrier, okay? So just remember those words, because we're going to figure out what this was all about. And now let's go this way with what yes feels like. Calming, peaceful, warming, encouragement, soothing, acceptance. What was that? Free. Yesterday. Yeah. Yesterday, all my troubles. That one? Good. Far away. Very good. What else? We planned that. Yes. Any other words for yes? Open, expansive, vulnerable, connecting. You felt me? Okay. Love, potential, settled. What was that? Reassured. Welcome. A hurricane? Say it again. Equivocating. Okay, equivocating. What else? Any other yes words? Connection and what? Validated. Okay. So I want you just to remember this feeling you had, because what we're going to do now is I'm going to take you on a journey into this word relationships. Because if you just pause as we get ready to do our dive, the word relationship generally means a connection between what you might say is you and something that is outside of what you might say is you. Now, this is linguistically, these words are really hard, as you'll see as we get into this, but you have an experience, let's just be really physical about it, of a body sitting in a chair, or if you're out in the other area, maybe you're standing. And let's just say that that is your inner experience. So you have an inner experience in this body that you're born into, right? You come to this event, some guy in another body gets up on this stage, and I said, okay, let's do this little exercise. And all I do is do one something, then I do another something, the no and the yes, and it creates a profoundly different inner experience for you. And I'm not even your father telling you can't have ice cream before dinner, right? I'm just some guy saying harshly no, and I try to say it sweetly yes. And that's just a really interesting thing. What transpired between this body and the body you're in quotes, you? What happened there? So part of what we're going to do is try to understand what a relationship is and look at this no-yes experiment, because what you experienced in what we'll call the no state is something that happens quite often in our lives, and yet we're not aware of it, and yet it creates all sorts of difficulties in our inner life and our relational life. So we need to really understand that, and that's what we're going to do. And to do that, I'm going to tell you a story that's going to begin with your body, and it's going to then move out from there. So I don't want to shock anyone, but before the you in your body existed, what were you? Well, that's the ultimate question, isn't it? I mean, what were you before you were born? A lot of people, I'm a psychiatrist. I have patients come to me with the main complaint is, where am I going to be when I'm dead? I've never had a patient come say, where was I before I was conceived? What if it's the same place? So why is there a directionality to our worries? It's just it's something I worry about, But anyway, so you were somewhere before you were conceived. Or maybe you weren't, or whatever. That's a deep philosophical question. But there was a moment when the trillions and trillions of sperm that could have contributed to, and I hope I'm not shocking any of you here, but that could have contributed to this joining with an egg, trillions and trillions of eggs, right? of all the various combinations, there was one magnificent, amazing moment where of all those possibilities arose one actuality. That sperm and that egg got together and they made what's called the conceptus, right? And if you remember how the biology works of that, the egg has half the amount of genes, the sperm has another half, so it's like half and half make a whole kind of thing. And so these sperm and this one egg got together and they made the beginning of your body. It was one cell big. Now, I'm not going to go through all the divisions because we'd be here a long time. But if you just follow me on how this works, take your hands and put them in a little ball like this. There comes a time when this one cell becomes 2, 4, 8, 16, right? 32, 64, 128, 256, etc. It gets so big, it's like the ball that you're representing in your hands, where there's a very special moment in all of our development that's called differentiation, where these cells, which are basically the same, differentiate from each other. Make the ball again. And there's an outer layer and there's an inner layer, okay? And this becomes a really important theme we're going to trace through this entire talk. This differentiation is connected to a process called linkage. So the outer layer of cells and the inner layer of cells need to communicate with each other somehow. But now do this. Let me try to do this with this thing, where you take your hand model of this conceptus, now is a little teeny embryo, and move your fingernails inward so the knuckles kiss each other one by one. So you have the second knuckles meeting each other. And look how the fingernails are now in the inside. Everybody see that? Back it up again, reverse it. Make it so it's the conceptus there, and then the cells are on the outside. This outer layer of cells is called the ectoderm, the skin, basically. And these skin cells are going to push inward. It's called invaginate. And they go inward, and see where the fingernails are? Those skin cells now are going to become your neural tube, and they're going to form your entire nervous system. So the basic cell of the nervous system, the neuron, is really a super fancy skin cell. Now, this becomes incredibly important for the entire talk, because what is the skin all about? Protection, and what else? Touch, and what else? It's the connection exactly between the inner world and the interworld. Let's just say it like that. Your skin is how you connect with the world outside your body, and you make it connect with the inside of the body. The entire nervous system, including the brain, which we're going to get into in a moment, is all about the connection of the inner and the outer. This is extremely important. Okay, so the egg and sperm get together, the conceptus divides, okay, now it's invaginating, so the neural tube is being made, the brain is being made, and now, here's the amazing thing. You're in the womb, and these experiences we have in the womb, do you have to eat in the womb? No. Do you have to breathe in the womb? No. Do you have to pay taxes in the womb? No. Do you have to read the newspaper and worry about the future of the globe? No. You are truly a human being, just being human in the womb. You're at one with the uterus, okay? I'm serious about that. Now, you're in there at one with the uterus, and pretty soon it gets kind of crampy because you're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then what happens? You're expelled from nirvana. Out you come, however you come. And then what happens? Somebody slaps you on the butt, you got bright lights, it's cold, and no matter how fabulous your parents are, something happens called hunger. And you get this incredible pain inside of you, and with this pain, what are you going to do to survive? Cry. Like that, right? Now, depending on how our caregivers respond to the cry, will determine a lot of things, but how we're shaped is shaped by our genes, which determine how the brain is going to grow and other areas of the body, And our experiences now are going to shape how we start unfolding. Those two things always interact, genes and experience. It's never nature versus nurture. It's always nature and nurture. That versus makes no sense. Because the fact is, the way your parents respond to you is biology. Relationships are biology. Now you're just 1 minute old. You're a day old. You're a week old, right? And because you were born into this body as a mammal and not like a fish, because you could have been born a fish, but you weren't. You were born a mammal. Now, what's the story with mammals? Mammals need the care of their caregiver to survive, or they die. That's our story, right? Any of us who raise dogs or cats, I raise mice and rats and guinea pigs, you know they all need their caregivers, right? And that's awesome, right? And if any of you raise, like I raise frogs, those frogs who lay the eggs, they don't do anything to protect those little tadpoles, right? Or fish. Any of you raise fish, you know the parent fish will eat their babies. That's, because they're not mammals. Now, birds share this attachment thing we have as mammals. And then as primates, we have a very sophisticated social hierarchy. The bigger the brain, the more socially complex we are. We have very complicated brains. But here's the amazing thing as we're getting to understand attachment and relationships, is that we have something that you may have heard of, but it's worth just naming. It's called allo-parenting. Allo is the prefix for other. Parenting is parenting. So other parenting means, unlike chimpanzees or gorillas or orangutans, or those are all ape cousins, or monkeys, or your dog or your cat, what we do as human beings is super special. We share responsibility for our infants with non-birth parents. We take our infant and we give it to another person in the village, and we say, I got some other things to do. Take care of little Junior here. Right? Now that is extremely important in our evolution. And if you want to read a beautiful book on it, it's by the wonderful anthropologist Sarah Hrdy, H-R-D-Y, in a book called Mothers and Others. What Sarah has postulated, which is basically pretty accepted now, is that this moment of our evolution, especially as humans, not as primates, but as humans, meant that our relationships determined our survival. Not just during attachment, but this way we had to understand the mind of another person. If I come up to one of my village mates and I've got my baby, I've got to look at my village mate, let's say it's you, and I'm saying, okay, I've got my baby, she's got all my genes, this is like the most precious commodity in evolutionary terms I've got, but I'm responsible for hunting the elk down here by the elk refuge. Have you been there? So I'm going to hunt those elk, and I got to bring in food for the whole village. I can't take care of this baby. Where's your attention? What's your intention? What's in your awareness? Okay, I can trust you. Here, take the baby, please. There you go. Oh, good. You're really good at that. Good. She takes care of it. So I go hunting off the elk. But it's not just me hunting elk by myself. What am I doing? I've got other village mates where we're going to figure out how to get the most elk we can get, because we are communicating with each other as a collaborative species. Our deepest nature as human beings is actually to be part of a larger whole, larger than the skin-encased body. Now, we may have forgotten that, but those are our origins for millions of years. I come back and get my baby. Oh, thank you very much. And now we're hanging out, and we're a village. And we have an identity as a whole because of our relationships, because our skin nor skull define who our identity is. Yes, I have an inner life, but what research suggests, this is a really incredible view, is that the first time I figured out things like, what am I aware of, where's my attention, where's my intention, is by looking at my village mate and figuring it out in her. So in my brain, what that means is, as a human being, my mammalian brain and then my primate brain, now it's a human brain, develops all this machinery to look at the face of another person, to listen to the sounds the other person is making, to look at the nonverbal signals of that person, and to make a map in this brain in my head of the mind of my village partner. Is she trustworthy or not? Where's her awareness? Where's her attention? Where's her intention? And I do that before I even know, the theory goes, that I have a mind. Your very capacity for consciousness and self-awareness is relational. This is like huge. And then when you come back to what we said about the brain coming from skin, you can understand how this fancy skin stuff says, I'm all about the inner and the outer. I've got to know what's in my village mate's mind, what's in her inner life, so I can know what to do with my inner decisions. Everyone follow me so far? So this story of the evolution of the brain and the development of the brain in terms of embryo into baby shows you that by the time this baby's like a year of age, this little baby, has got a whole bunch of sophisticated machinery about saying, I can figure out another person's mind, their feelings, their thoughts, their intentions, their awareness, all that stuff that's part of our subjective mental life becomes the essence of what it means to be human. I'm going to understand another person's mind, and then I use that same neural machinery that lets me map out the mind of another to map out my own mind. This is why I'm trained as an attachment researcher. What we've demonstrated is that the way a parent interacts with that baby will determine that baby's capacity for self-awareness and awareness of others. It's an inborn potential that needs experience to develop well. So what you do with your kids in terms of attachment shapes the development of their mind. Then when they get into schools, if a school does certain things, it changes the way the student's mind works. I'll give you a teeny example. When I was in college, I was a biochemistry major. I really was interested in fish, and I wanted to know why salmon could go and be hatched in freshwater but survive in saltwater. They had to do something to their bodies, so I got in a lab to study that, and we found the enzyme that allowed them to change the density of their plasma. Anyway, it was kind of pretty straightforward. But everything we used in that, I mean, because you just ask some questions, you figure it out. But everything we used in that study was about the physicality of nature, right? It was about the density of, of stuff in the blood of the fish, and salt had a certain density to it compared to freshwater. Anyway, it was all kind of logical, physical stuff. At night, I was working on a suicide prevention service, a hotline, right? And I was trained that when a suicide person calls and you're on that line, you had to bring your entire presence to that relationship. And you had to tune into the mind of the caller. And if they were in distress or in despair, and of course they're suicidal, that's why they're calling, so you have to tune into that. If you just say, hey, the sun's shining tomorrow, it's a good day, you had to resonate with them and be present with them. You had to attune to their inner life. And the way I remember all that now is with the word part. If you were present, if you're open to what was going on, that's the P of part, and then you attuned, meaning you focused your attention on the subjective inner life of the other person, that's attunement, and then you allowed your body to feel the ache but not become the other person, that's called resonance. So presence, attunement, resonance. Just like guitar string, the low notes don't become the high notes, they just resonate with them. So it's not mirroring. You don't have to become the suicidal person. He says, I'm going to kill myself. Well, I'm going to kill myself too. Isn't that attuning to you? No. It's you maintain a differentiated nature, but you link. There's that concept again. And then the T of part is you develop trust. So the fundamental nature on the suicide service was you had to tune into the mind of the other. Now, flash forward just a couple of years, and I'm in medical school, and I'm being taught to use my knowledge as a biochemist with diagnosing people. And I go into the room with my professor, and the professor says to a patient, I hate to tell you, but we've done your scans, we've done your blood work, I've done the physical exam, and I think you'll probably be dead in about 4 months. And then he would walk out. Now, what's wrong with that? So I would go out of the room, and when I tug on his jacket, I say, excuse me. He goes, what? I said, like. Now, the look on his face was, what's wrong with you? But then they would actually say that, what's wrong with you? I said, well, don't you want to talk to them about how they feel? They go, why? I'm not exaggerating. Why would I talk to that person about how they feel? I told them what's going on with them. Now, what's missing there? Resonance, what else? Attunement, presence, everything. That's easy. No trust, right? So as a student, what I started noticing in my other medical students, we were in our 20s, is they became less and less empathic. So in the locker room, unlike when I met them on the first day of school, by the end of the first year of school, in the locker room, they'd come into the locker room and say, I saw this incredible liver today. And I'd go, don't you mean you saw a person with a liver disease? And they go, oh, shut up, you're from California. Like this. So when I dropped out of medical school, which I did, I just felt there was something absolutely wrong. What was wrong there? These were smart doctors. Some of them had very fancy prizes and all this kind of stuff. What was wrong there? No relationship, exactly. What was missing in this relationship that would make us feel there was no relationship there? Empathy. And what is empathy? Connection. What kind of connection? Seeing the mind of another person, seeing their feelings, their thoughts, their subjective experience. If you had to summarize the first part of what mind means, it means subjective experience. It's why you can't equate the mind with the brain. I had super, wonderful brain teachers, but they weren't talking about the mind, and everyone equates mind with brain. They're not the same. The first way they're not the same is that the mind includes subjective experience. So you can have a professor of medicine say to someone, you're dying, and they may be correct, but they're missing the mind. They're mind blind. And so we have a feeling there's something wrong with that relationship, right? So when I dropped out of school, I went on this search just to go, oh my God, that's a nut house, that medical school. I couldn't even figure, I was very young, I couldn't figure it out. And when I decided to go back, I had to make up this word called mindsight for sensing the mind of oneself or others, insight and empathy. And when I went back, I felt like an anthropologist going back, because of course they wouldn't have changed, and they didn't change. And so when I was there, it was like studying them. Like, how bad can you really be as a doctor who doesn't develop a relationship? Now, what's really strange about it, I'll tell you, this is really, I made it through and went into pediatrics and then psychiatry, but what was really strange about it was years later, I was asked to go back to that medical school to give them a lecture about why emotions and narratives are so important in medicine. And I thought I was nuts, and I actually went to the room where I decided to drop out of medical school, which was called the Ether Dome, which is where they first used ether to anesthetize people, and that's exactly what it felt like in medical school. They were being anesthetized. Seriously. So mindsight is the deepest way you can describe what you use in relationships. Right after that visit back to medical school, a study came out to show you can actually have an internist see a patient with a common cold. And you have two conditions. One condition, the physician is instructed to give the right medical care and things like that. And the other, they're instructed to do just the same thing, but to identify an inner experience of the patient with the cold and to say something to show they're identifying. It would be something as simple as, if this were like in May and it was a student, they might say, wow, this is May and you're probably in final exams. Yes, I am. That must be so frustrating to have a common cold right in the middle of exams. Yes. 20-second, 30-second empathic comment. That's it. Those subjects, the patients, who got an empathic comment, as simple as that. I'm not talking about psychiatry and psychotherapy. I'm talking about a common cold. They got over their cold a day sooner, and their immune system, when they tested their blood, was much more robust. Right? Empathy is not a luxury for our relationships. They heal us. And that's not just as physicians. That's as all of us. So we need to ask the question, what is a relationship? Why is the part we play actually improving immune function? Why is it that when you have connections with people, you probably know the difference? When they don't have Mindsight, you feel one way, and when they do, you feel a completely different way. So what we're going to do now is look into this idea of why do relationships matter so much? So I'm going to ask you to think about relationships in your life, ones that are with people that are close to you. And I'm going to ask you something. How many of you would say that relationships that you have shape how you feel? Raise your hand. Okay. So feelings are a part of the mind, and so we're saying relationships shape your mind. Okay, that's number one. How many would say that where your attention goes, like what you're thinking about, is shaped by your relationships with other people that are close to you? Yes, so basically everybody, yeah. So it may seem like a no-brainer, but the mind has something very much to do with relationships. Is that fair to say so far? Right? So if we just say the mind is up in your brain, which Hippocrates said 2,500 years ago, the mind is just output of the brain's activity. And that's how I was trained in medical school, to think like that. And if you think like that, here's the problem. You become mind blind. Because subjective experience is not the same as the brain. Even if it's 100% dependent on it, it's not the same as it. Consciousness is not the same as the brain, even if it's dependent on it, which hasn't been proven, but there are correlates that suggest that it obviously influences the brain and influences consciousness. Number three, we have something called information processing. And information processing is basically something that happens outside of consciousness as well as in consciousness. So you can do all sorts of studies to show that you're always processing information. So like if I say to you, the Grand Teton. Okay, now, who would like to share what happened after I said Grand Teton? Anyone want to share as an example? Did it just stay with my saying Grand Teton? Oh, I'm sorry, Lake Quantico. So you got the other ones that I missed. Excellent. Okay, what else? Who else had? And a visual image happened. And how many of you had a visual image? Okay, great. And then anyone have anything happen after the visual image? Magnificence. And when you say magnificence, was it a feeling or just the reality of the magnificence? It's a feeling. It's a love. And you thought of your cousin, right? This is what's called information processing. That is, information is a pattern of energy with symbolic value. Like if I go like that, it's just energy. What kind of energy is that? It's negative energy, I'm sorry. That's funny. It's air molecules moving, right? It's sound. That's funny. Do you want to say more about that? We have all night, This is an all-nighter we're going to pull. Okay, so, all right, so you have energy flow. In that case, that wasn't symbolic of anything except in your case, but in general, it's just straight bar, energy. But if I say Grand Teton, right, that is the same form of energy, right? It's sound, or if I typed it out, but it's a different pattern, right, which has symbolic value. Information is energy in formation. It has symbolic value, and it's more like a verb than a noun because stuff unfolds from whatever you say. Even if I say a noun like Grand Teton, it's actually a verb. It's going to have things unfolding, unfolding, unfolding. Keep an eye on that because we're going to come back to the no-yes thing soon and explain it. Okay, so what we're saying is that we've got this thing called the mind, which includes subjective experience, consciousness, and information processing, but none of that really puts it into relationships, does it? So if I said to you, what is a relationship? Think about it. What would you say? Synchronized interactions, beautiful. Let's start with interactions. What is an interaction? Back and forth communication, excellent. That's synchronized in time, excellent. So back and forth communication. What is communication? Sharing of information, exactly. And what is information? A pattern of energy with symbolic value, exactly. So we've, thank you. We've just defined what a relationship is. That's awesome. A relationship is the sharing of energy and information, period. Now, you can do it with people, but you can also do it with the planet. Here, you do it with nature all the time. And you have a lesson to teach the rest of the world because you have a relationship with Earth that is missing in most urban environments. It's missing when people do all sorts of things that treat the planet like a trash can instead of like the precious, fragile ecosphere that it is. So, you say, I love Grand Teton. And I'm sorry, what's the other lakes I'm supposed to remember? Oh, God, that's going to be hard for me. Say it again. Lake Trois Tetons. Oh, Lake Trois Tetons. Oh, that's beautiful. Excellent. Lake Trois Tetons. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. So you have a relationship with Earth here that's very special. You have a relationship with each other that's very special. We've defined a relationship as the sharing of energy and information. Now, the brain. What is the brain? Where's the brain? Let's start with that easier question. Where's the brain? In your head. Excellent. Now, the wonderful hosts who've sponsored my visit here, not just for you tonight, but tomorrow for the professionals and this afternoon with all the high school students, and they were incredible, by the way. For any of you who are parents, tell them I thought they were awesome. They were awesome. When you really think about how devoted it was that the host created this experience, they actually came in early to this theater, and underneath your seats and taped underneath the seat where you're standing in the extra room, they have placed a model of the brain that you can take home with you. So if you reach under your chair, seriously, this is how giving your hosts are. Reach under the chair, reach under, see if you can feel it, and then pull out your arm. You'll see attached to your arm is a hand. Anyone see it? Okay. This is your handout for today. Okay? So, if you fold did everyone find your model? Very good. Okay. If you fold your thumb in the middle and fold your fingers over the top, my daughter says, Dad, don't ever say this, so please don't tell her I said this. It's a handy model of the brain. And it goes in your head like this. Okay? This is the orientation of the brain. All right? So, we can get a close-up on it there. So the top of the brain is called the cortex. If you lift up your cortex, underneath that is the limbic area. You'd have two thumbs for it to be a perfect model, but most of us just have one thumb. And I say that, I swear, because someone said, I went to a gas station and the attendant had two thumbs. So please say most of us have one. I said, okay. And after that talk, when I started saying it, I went to a gas station to fill up my rental car, to fill up the gas. And there, the attendant had two thumbs. I'm not kidding. Life is weird. You know what I'm talking about, right? It's like where's Scott? I ran into Scott earlier. I was just running around. Where is he? There he is. Anyway, there you are, Scott. Just randomly sort of walking somewhere, and then I meet the person I'm supposed to meet. It's just like beautiful. Anyway, life is like that. Okay, so most of us have one thumb. That's all a diversion from that. And then if you lift up your limbic area, you've got your brainstem here. Now, we need to go over this model of the brain, and I hope you don't get squeamish by doing neuroanatomy right now. But it's important to understand the no-yes experience and for us to review fundamental take-home points about relationships. And then, we have a half an hour of Q&A so we can get into more deeply. But it goes like this. Okay. This brain in your head, as we said, is just a bunch of fancy skin cells. That's all it is. The whole purpose of this brain in your head is actually to take care of both the inner experience of the body and the relational experience of the body. That's it. What is it about? If you had to summarize this brain in like a one-sentence elevator speech, believe it or not, it's the embodied mechanism of energy and information flow. That's it. Bless you. In fact, let's have a bless you for everyone's going to sneeze so we don't have to keep on doing it. You ready? Do you feel blessed? Yes, good. Okay, so energy and information flow is going to happen through this nervous system. It's the embodied mechanism. What did we say a relationship was? The sharing of what? Energy and information flow. Oh my gosh. What did we just figure out? What does the brain and a relationship share in common? Energy and information flow. One is the embodied mechanism, one is the sharing. Now, we're going to get into a little bit of neuroanatomy in just a moment, but just to finish out the important connection of brain, and it's in the body, so we'll call it the embodied brain, relationships, and we've been talking a lot about something else. What have we been talking about? Mind. Why would Hippocrates say the mind only comes from the head? Why would William James in 1890 say the mind is just brain activity, basically? Why do many, many, many neuroscientists and psychiatrists, psychologists say the mind is just brain activity? Why do newspaper writers write, they show a picture of the brain, they say, here's an image of the mind? Well, because that's what they believe. That's what they believe. What I'm going to suggest to you is while that belief is 2,500 years old, and that really smart, well-intended people have it, it is a part truth. And as long as we think it's a total truth, we are going to be having serious problems in the human family. The mind has something to do with energy and information flow. And that flow is not limited by your skull nor your skin. And the system of the mind is as much embodied as it is relational. And when you're on the phone on a suicide service and all that's being exchanged are sounds through a telephone wire, and the way you synchronize your communication, that's what a relationship is. The way you share energy and information flow and are present, attune, resonate, and get trust going will make this person put the gun down and not shoot themselves in the brain. That's how important it is to realize the mind is not just the same as the brain. Now, energy and information flow is a weird way to talk. I have interns that work with me when I'm revising my books, so I wrote a textbook called The Developing Mind, and every time I revise it, we're on our 3rd revision now, I say, look, find somebody else who talks like this so we can have some friends. And nobody talks like this. So that doesn't mean it's not true. It just means you're very lonely. So we're looking for friends. So the issue is, if you take the studies of anthropology and sociology and linguistics, beautiful, beautiful academic work, and combine it with the work of mathematics and physics and chemistry, and then biology, including my field, psychiatry, or psychology. And you put all these together, which is this field I work in called interpersonal neurobiology. Inter is there because it means the betweenness. Personal means the withinness. And neurobiology is just throw that out there, say we're going to study things like the brain. Interpersonal neurobiology is a field where we combine all the disciplines of science into one framework. So we're going to end up saying things that are called consilient. That is, we look for the common ground. Does the study of the universe in terms of mathematics fit with this? Does the study of physics in terms of understanding energy fit with this? All the way up to anthropology and the study of culture. Because as you probably know, the way we humans are mostly evolving these days is cultural evolution, not genetic evolution. Of course, genetic evolution keeps on happening with mutations and stuff like that. But the primary thing is cultural evolution. What is culture? Culture is the sharing of information across generations within a society. In contemporary culture, maybe starting 2,500 years ago with Hippocrates and contemporary science, the mind was considered just an output of the brain, which meant that the self, which comes from the mind, is a solo self. Right? The idea that mind is just a product of your brain means you're alone in this thing. Means when you were in the womb and you came out, buddy, you're alone. And if you live a life believing that who you are, yourself, which comes from your mind, is just coming from your head, it's a lonely, disconnected, for some people, meaningless existence. And what I'm suggesting to you is that when you put all these sciences together, and we have now 60 textbooks in this series that we have, that I'm the editor of, when you look at these textbooks, you realize we've been on the wrong path in contemporary culture to say that the mind only comes from the head and that the self is only coming from the skin encased body. Because what did we just figure out? We said, well, hold on. If your self is arising as much in your relationships as it is in your body, because energy and information flow is what we're looking at, then there'd be no reason to limit yourself to the skin. Of course, you have an inner self, for sure. And you should make sure your experience is good. You should feed your body well, exercise your body, run up I'm sorry, what is it? I'll never get it. You have to train me later on. Say it again. Like Teton, you want to run up and down that free form and all the stuff we do. And, you want to take care of your body. Sleep is like the most underrated activity. Most important thing you can do is sleep. Let's go to sleep right now. Seriously. So all that stuff is about your body. I'm not at all taking away from your body. What I'm saying is that we've had 2,500 years of the really diplomatic thing to say is a partial truth. The a little bit more extreme thing to say, a scientific error, and then probably the bolder and probably more useful thing to say, a toxic lie. A toxic lie. Because if you raise this little girl that we were sharing to say, hey, little Julie, you're just by yourself. And the key thing to do is when you get into preschool, just you play with the blocks as best as you can, because that'll get you into the best elementary school. And when you get into that elementary school, do really well in the spelling bee. Don't help anybody else, because this is really like being the brightest candle in the box. And if you see another candle lit out, you know what you should do? Blow out their wick. Because when it comes time for you to apply to college, you want to get into the most elite college you can. Because the only way you can do that, they only take 3.5% at the college we really want you to go to, is you better make sure you're really the brightest candle, and they'll take you. Because why would they take you if someone else is lit up? Because if you get in there, you're going to get into the most elite graveyard. And I was asked to do an intervention at Palo Alto High School and Gunn High School, where you probably know the story. These are the high schools right across from Stanford. And the train from San Francisco goes down to San Jose, Silicon Valley. And they've had repeated over and over again these young, huge potential adolescents who are jumping in front of that train when they don't achieve what they think they should be achieving or somebody thinks they should achieve. So they asked me to go do an intervention, and you can see the 2-hour talk I did where the students filmed me doing it. And what I said was, if you grow up thinking you're a separate self, all you got to do is blow out everybody else so you're like the only candle in town. But instead, think about a world where instead of thinking you're only the wax, you are the light in addition to the wax. So when you're all lit up and your wick has a flame on it, beautiful, and you look to your right, and there's some candle that's struggling to have their wick stay lit, you lean over, you light them up, you straighten yourself out, and then you look to your left, and there's another candle that's struggling, you lean over and you help her out, you straighten yourself out. Now, what did it do to my flame to light those two up? Nothing. And what did it do to the world? It made the world a brighter place. That's the kind of world we can create when you realize we are relational. We are the light as well as the wax. We live in a contemporary culture which tells you all you are, little Julie, is you're the wax. And just be as good a wax as you can be, because that's what's it about, baby. That's it. Let your wax shine. You know, it's a lie that's killing us. It kills Julie. It has people jump in front of trains. Do you realize we have the highest adolescent suicide rate we've had? You know, these kids are in incredible pain because the whole view of a separate self is a toxic lie. It is a built-in trauma to being a member of this culture, and it is wrong. And when you look at it from a science view, you say something really went wrong here. We had a village before where we were connected to each other. And I'm not trying to idealize the past. The past had a lot of problems. So I'm not saying go back to some time that never existed. What I'm saying is we have kids growing up in this age where all they think of in terms of themselves is, I'm separate, I'm separate, I'm separate. Now, with social media the way it is, and one of the questions that came up at the high school was, what do you think smartphones are doing to the brain development we have? Right? And you can ask your kids, those of you who have kids, what I said, and I'll tell you what I said. This is part of what I said because we were at the end of time and they had to go. But if you think about the fact that we have a brain that is constantly trying to figure out how we fit in, right? And this is to come back to this brain here. Let me just review the essentials of this brain anatomy thing. When you're in the womb, your brain stem is developing. This is your 300 million year old part of your brain. And the important part for our discussion is it's the part of the brain that has the fight, flight, freeze, and faint reactions to threat. Okay, that's the brainstem. 300 million years old. If you put your thumb over, this is 200 million years old, the limbic area, and it's when we became mammals and we developed attachment, and that's fantastic. And we not only depended on caregivers with this limbic area being responsible for emotion and working with the brainstem and the body, for motivation, for memory, all sorts of things. But attachment is one of the things it works with. For 200 million years, we've had that. Then, if you believe what the researcher, Steve Suomi, has discovered, it's very sad to say this, but as the cortex developed in our primate lineage, for probably 50 million years, way before there were human beings on board, we had in this brain tribal mentality, where you said, this is my group of monkeys, and that group of monkeys is not in my in-group, and they can threaten me, so I think when I have the opportunity, I will kill them. And that's what Steve has shown, Steve Suomi, is that even monkeys have this kind of, it looks like genocide, but it's basically a lineage of their genetic line. And so probably for 50 million years, we've had a part of the primate cortex that does this in-group, out-group distinction. Now, if you look at then how the cortex develops in human beings for the last somewhere between 1 and 4 million years, depending on which scientist you're looking at, but for the last few million years, you have this cortex which is able to imagine the mind of another person and can shut off these circuits of compassion, which are right here behind your forehead. So you can do brain scan studies, which basically you show a person where you couldn't relate to them. These areas are not lit up. You can show the same photo, but a different kind of paragraph beneath, which shows the person's like you, similar education, similar religious background, whatever, and the compassion circuits light up. It's unbelievable. We as human beings have a built-in neurological capacity to look at another human being and do this quick assessment. Are you in my cave or are you not in my cave? And if you're not in my cave, I'm either going to ignore you, or, and this is what the research shows, if I'm in a state of threat, I will treat you with hostility. And these are in experimental paradigms. All you have to do is look at the newspaper and look at genocide. It's not a random event. It's built into our neurological structure. It's in our DNA. So you might say, well, hold on, how does this fit with relationships? Well, it tells us that it isn't as simple as saying we just have to do kumbaya and say, oh, we all love each other. Because we are born into a body which can say, if you're in my in-group, I cannot be a solo self, but we're in a tribe together. It's called tribalism. And I'll protect you. But if you're in my out-group, I'll kill you. That is a human potential that is realized all the time. Now, we have studies that show you can actually train the mind to overcome the brain's propensities for example, implicit racial bias, or for this in-group, out-group distinction we have. You have the capacity, with the training of the mind, to actually allow a person to go from feeling I'm a separate self and I feel disconnected in the world and I should maybe end my life or try to, just get drunk or do something that just distracts me from my disconnectedness and my meaninglessness. You can train the mind to overcome that. These mind training practices include training the focus of attention. It includes opening awareness. It actually includes generating kindness toward oneself and others, one's inner self and the interself we have. And so you can actually change the structure of the brain by training the mind. So part of what we want to talk about at the end of this part of the talk, and then open it up for Q&A, is that if we realize the first step is to identify who we are is as much in our relationships as it is with our inner life, then that's going to be a huge first step. The second step is to realize you can use the mind, and this is what cultural evolution is all about, to actually train people to strengthen the health of their mind, to give them a kind mind, to give them a mind that actually is open, to give them a mind that's focused. These are all research-proven abilities that what you can do. And then you say, well, how would I do this for myself? And now I'm just going to give you like a 2-minute overview of one thing that ties it to the no-yes thing, and then we'll open it up. But it goes like this. If you look at every branch of science and say, when can we look at an individual's life, a family's life, a community's life, and talk about that life being healthy, that life flourishing, that life thriving? I'm going to give you one word, kind of like Dustin Hoffman was given in The Graduate. You know the word? Plastics. But this is coming from science, not from Hollywood. But the word is integration. If you take the word integration and are very careful about how you define it, the linking of differentiated parts, you can examine in an individual life, and this was published in October 2015 in something called the Human Connectome Study, every measure of well-being, how happy you are, how medically healthy you are, all these factors in your life, every measure they could come up with, one brain factor predicted it. How integrated your brain was. How the different areas are linked. In science, we call that how interconnected the connectome was. That's just a fancy term for how the differentiated areas are linked. That's number one. Number two, if you look at every mental disorder that's ever been studied, so depression, manic depressive illness, people with schizophrenia, people with autism, all those conditions have impairments to integration in the brain. And then if you look at things that sometimes parents do to kids, called abuse or neglect. What has Marty Teicher at Harvard University shown? Integration is impaired with trauma, abuse or neglect. Now, quickly we need to say that what other studies have shown, for example, mindfulness meditation that strengthens the ability to focus attention, open awareness, and build kind intention. And I know you had Richie here, so Richie Davidson's book, and also you had Dan here, Dan Goleman. Dan Goleman and Richie Davidson's book, Altered Traits, reviews all the science behind what I'm about to say in one sentence. But all those studies of mindfulness training, this is one of the ways you can train the mind, come down to they integrate the brain. So everything that is problematic in those conditions that are difficult actually are the areas of the brain that grow. So in your hand model of the brain, it's your prefrontal cortex that links the cortex, limbic area, brainstem, and body with the social world. So it's linking vertically. The corpus callosum that links the differentiated left and right grows with mindfulness meditation. In your limbic area, the hippocampus grows. And even those connectome studies, which are newer, that grows. So the bottom line is every either intervention or condition of well-being is associated with a more integrated brain. What about relationships? If you take my field, I'm an attachment researcher. I study parent-child relationships, and we can show that the way a child is treated in the first few years of life has continuing impacts now into the 40s, is this longitudinal study in Minnesota has been done. And what we think is going on, or at least from interpersonal neurobiology, what we think is going on is an integrated relationship where a parent honors differences and promotes linkages with a child. So when the relationship is integrated, it stimulates the growth of integration in that child's brain. And integration in the brain is a source of all forms of regulation, like regulating attention, emotion, thought, memory, behavior, relationships, morality. All those are called executive functions. They're the basis of resilience. They're the basis of health. So what do we just say? When energy and information flow sharing is integrated, the brain becomes integrated. Now, when we think about the no-yes experiment, what did no feel like? For some of you, it felt like fighting. Some of you fleeing. It may have made you frozen. Some you may have felt like collapsing. In terms of how the brain works, that no state turns on what's called a reactive state. A reactive state gets you ready to deal with a threat. Many, many people run around in our modern society not even aware that they're in a, what I would call a no brain state. That is, when I said no, it creates a brain state, so we'll call it a no brain state, that leads to this fight, flight, freeze, faint, proneness to chaos or rigidity, basically. And in the math of systems, it turns out that when integration is not present, chaos or rigidity ensue. Every symptom of every syndrome in the psychiatric Bible of disorders is actually chaos or rigidity or both. Like mania is chaos and depression is rigidity. Or in post-traumatic states, intrusive memories, intrusive bodily sensations are chaotic. Removing yourself from social interaction would be an example of rigidity. So chaos and rigidity are what you experience with that no brain state. So what's the yes brain state? The yes brain state turns on what Steve Porges, one of the authors in our series, calls the social engagement system. You reach out to connect with others. You're open to learning. So in the high school, what I said to the high school students was, if you're not aware when you're in a reactive state and you're trying to go to school or interact with other kids in a reactive state, it's not going to go so well. So the first step is to focus attention on your internal state. Now, I didn't say it to them because I'll say it to you, but there's this book called The Yes Brain, which actually walks you through how to do that with kids. This yes brain, but they are the kids, so I'm not going to say it to them. But this is, if you're wondering, how do I do this with kids or adolescents? what Tina Bryson and I did was write this whole book about this exercise and say, well, how do you actually raise kids to be living a resilient life full of curiosity and the capacity to approach challenges with strength? And instead of collapsing in the face of that you do what Carol Dweck calls a fixed mindset, where you say, oh, I can't do that. You approach a challenge with resilience. You say, this is an opportunity to learn more. So in closing, what I want to say is that we can create a culture that's a yes brain culture. You can create a place where people feel your presence. If you ask, what can I do about this when I leave this presentation? If you just remember the part you can play as a member of our human family, you will get the whole thing in 4 words. Presence means you cultivate your capacity to be open and receptive to what's happening as it's happening. Yes, does it mean you can have judgments and thoughts? Of course you do. But when you separate awareness in a kind of, if you made it like a wheel, we have a practice called the wheel of awareness. Imagine the hub is awareness and the rim of this wheel are your thoughts. When you learn to separate the rim of thoughts and judgments from the hub of awareness, you develop a presence that is the key to your own well-being and the key to relational well-being. Attunement is where you develop your mindsight skills, which is what I told the high school students. You develop the ability to know your own inner life. It's an inner compass. So you can also know the inner life of someone else. That's what attunement is. But with presence and attunement, what's going to happen is you're going to resonate. So you have to be prepared not to over-identify with the suffering in the world, not to over-identify with all the pain that's out there. You resonate, you don't mirror, you don't become all the difficulties. That's what resonance is. So you can learn to be present, to be attuned, to resonate, and imagine a world of trust where instead of all the destructive competition, you could have constructive competition where you said, let's really fight with the world's problems and try to beat them so when we win the competition, everybody benefits. You're competitive, you go climb that mountain, but you don't have to destroy it. You can climb the mountain and achieve that in all sorts of mountains that are facing our world today, right? And the trust that we create is basically built on being present, attuned, and resonating. And when you do that, this little girl, Julie, that you helped take care of, thank you very much, she can grow up in a world of having a yes brain, where she's ready to confront the challenges. It's like my daughter, became an environmental science student. She said, I wanted to become an artist, but your other child, her older brother, he became a musician, so that's too much for one family, 2 artists. So I said, look, if you both contribute beauty and truth, that's fine. She goes, I'll do an environmental science. So I said to her, when she was finishing school, I said, don't you get depressed and doesn't this overwhelm you, the way things are going? She said, Dad, what else is there to do but at least to try? Because even if we don't succeed, we'll know we have really given it our best effort. And I couldn't believe it. And that's the kind of life we can all lead. Because ultimately, integration like that, where she's differentiating herself from the world's problems, but saying, I'm going to link to them, not ignore them. That kind of relational integration, not just with other people, but with the planet, that's the kind of way we can live a yes-brain life. And ultimately, you know what integration that we're talking about that's relational and neural? You know what this integration creates besides a yes-brain state? Integration made visible is kindness and compassion. And that's the kind of world we can create, where we light up each other's candles and make this a brighter world for all of us now and for all of the generations that are to come. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you. Thank you very much. There are some microphones running around the room. Well, not running around the room. There are people with microphones who have them. And I can also, if the microphone doesn't get to you in time, I can actually repeat the question. So if you have a question or a comment or even a joke, feel free to raise your hand and the microphone, the talking stick will come to you. Yes?
So you started to talk about technology, but you didn't finish. So I'm curious, what's the next step? What is your impression? What are the impacts of, and what do we do about it?
That's beautiful. That's a good collective mind question. So the question, I'll repeat it so everybody can hear it, is what about the whole business of screens and digital world, and what are we going to do about it in the future? What can you actually do about it? So the first thing, just to say as a reference, there's a conference that I teach at every year called Wisdom 2.0, and for free you can stream it. It's every February. So that is the question we ask at that conference. You know, what can we do with the digital age to actually bring more compassion and self-understanding into the world? And so, you know, that's, in practical terms, that's what's happening on the digital side. In terms of, you know, raising kids or even ourselves, what I said to the high school students is this, is I said, you know, where attention goes, neural firing flows, and neural connection grows. So what I said to them, as I said, it is up to you to choose how you want your brain to grow as it's being remodeled during adolescence. I said, if you want to spend time on screens of any sort, you know, pads, you know, computers, smartphones, and you want to be constantly stimulating your brain with physical sight stuff instead of mind sight stuff, which would happen when you're in real time with a friend, talking to a friend, hearing the friend's tone of voice, seeing their nonverbal signals, all of those things, and there are 7 of them. It's eye contact, facial expression, tone of voice, posture, gestures, timing, intensity of response. Most of those are not involved in any kind of digital communication, let alone when you're just getting stuff stimulated to you, especially with the social media where people are portraying themselves in these idealistic ways where they want to look so cool, and kids trying to figure out who they are constantly comparing themselves to others and feel inadequate. So that's all not so good, right? I said, but if you choose to do that, have at it, basically is what I said to them. I said, you're the one in charge of how your brain's going to grow. And I gave my son as a story, you know, I said, you know, when he was an adolescent, he played music all the time. Now he's a professional musician. And when you see him with an instrument in his hand, you can't tell the difference between his body and the instrument. I said, that's because he cared about music, and he did that. I said, if you want to just do, you know, these basically worthless stimulation things from a screen, you choose. And then you can ask Julia how they responded to that, but because she came in at the very, very end. But, you know, I mean, it's really giving them the knowledge, in terms of kids growing up. But I've seen adults walking their kids to school in a stroller on their smartphones, just constantly on that. You probably have had this too. You can be in an elevator and everyone's on their smartphones. Nobody talks to each other anymore. It is the saddest thing, you know. So if you look at the energy and information flow being streamed from a screen to a brain, it is so thin and so limited or so distorted that the nature of true conversation and connection is being really challenged. There's a great book by Sherry Turkle called Alone Together, which really addresses her research into this area. And, you know, I think there's something to do about it. I mean, every time I give a lecture there, I don't know if anyone listens, but it's all about, you know, bringing Mindsight into the digital world. And I'll be doing like a think tank with some people just thinking deeply about how we can do this more. But it's a serious problem, especially when you see how addicting it is and how people are just making money off of our kids. And that's how I ended the whole thing. I said, you want to watch those screens? Go for it. You know what's really happening? I said, all of those companies are trying to steal your money from you, and they're succeeding. I said, so if you want them to win, keep on doing it. And I said that because of the smoking campaign that you probably know about, where they told adolescents, oh, smoking will kill you, and then they put up, you know, pictures of skeletons and, you know, lung disease and X-ray and stuff like that, and it didn't do anything. And then finally what they did was they said, don't you realize these cigarette companies know they're going to kill you by doing this, and they just want your money, and every time you do that, you're making these adults richer? And the adolescent said, I don't want to make adults richer, you know, and they stopped. So that's a study you can actually look at. Yes, so that's the beginning. It's a big, big issue, and you can't stop it. It's more about discussing it with your kids, and we have a thing called the Healthy Mind Platter in the Brainstorm book, which just tells people, you know, balance things out. Once you realize where attention goes, neural firing flows, neural connection grows, and you make them responsible for their own brain growth, it's a totally different story than saying, oh, your raging hormones are going to drive you mad. You say, you're in the driver's seat. You know, you can learn to develop your brain in a more integrated way. Does that help address it? Yeah, thank you. Who's got the talking stick? Anyone else? Okay. Did it make sense what we talked about tonight? Okay, good.
Okay, so this is going to come out not probably in the most clear fashion because I've written too many notes, but I'm going to go take us down a notch here back to early childhood.
The sperm and egg, or
Not
after
quite,
the sperm and egg?
Not quite that far.
Yeah, we went
Not
really
quite that
back.
far.
We went even before the sperm and egg.
We
so
did.
Yes.
We did. You know, and it was. Thank you. I didn't know all that.
No, we didn't. You know, we could do part 2. You didn't know all that. Well, there you
I
go.
didn't,
We
you
could do
know.
part 2 where you say.
That's what I really took away tonight.
What is that potentiality? Well, that's a whole nother thing. 'Cause
A whole nother
There's another
conversation.
layer that we haven't even touched on that is really awesome that we could get into, but that's another kind of thing. Yes.
Okay, so basically, I'm going to go back to what you were talking about, so when we look at kids' ability to regulate themselves, and we know that when we get into that limbic response, they are unable to
Or
think.
brainstem response, yeah.
Brainstem response.
The reactive
yeah, thank
response,
you,
yeah.
brainstem response. They are unable to concentrate, unable to learn, unable to follow directions, think coherently, et cetera, during those younger developmental stages.
Or older ones like
Or overall,
adulthood.
to 24, but...
No, but I
4?
want to clarify.
Oh, my husband, right.
Exactly, yes.
I knew
Or
that
other
was
people
going
you may
on.
be familiar with, yes.
Yeah, I get that.
Right. Parents or whatever, yeah.
All of us, myself included. But anyway, my point is that, so one thing that I struggle with consistently, whether it's talking with peers, with other educators, whoever, you know, people of my parents' generation, is trying to help explain that when we approach, particularly in the younger years of kids' development, with this, we constantly go to the rules. We constantly go to the expectation. And we consistently ask them, you can, you know, in so many different scenarios, to perform in a certain way when we, perhaps haven't given them the clues on what we want them to do.
So what's the question? Tell me the question so I can know how to...
Am I talking too
No,
much?
I just want to know,
Shit.
I want to make sure I'm hearing the question. Because it's a huge topic you're bringing up, which
I
is
know,
so beautiful.
sorry.
But I just want to make sure I'm hearing the
The
question.
question is, how do we approach that and we change the overall mentality that exists in society today, where we have lost touch with helping people understand that it is about that connection and everything that you're talking about.
Beautiful, exactly. That's such a great question. Thank you for asking that. It's exactly the issue. You know, every parenting book I've ever written, starting with Parenting from the Inside Out with Mary Hartzell, was all about how one answer to the question is, when you look at the research across different cultures about attachment, to get to that part of your question, it really invites us from that research to say a parent's own understanding of her or his own experience of being parented is the best predictor of the child's attachment to that person. So we wrote Parenting from the Inside Out basically to answer your question. Like, what do we know from research is the best way to invite parents to become more connected to their children, all right? And so Parenting from the Inside is one step. I never would have written the other parenting books if I hadn't written that book first. And Whole Brain Child, No Drama Discipline, and Yes Brain, which I wrote with Tina Bryson, my student, now my colleague, you know, are all about exactly what your question is. How do you make the relationship the fundamental part of raising kids? And those books are used in schools too, because it's the same thing. You can call it a developmental relationship. And the studies where teachers in schools are using what are called prescriptive approaches, they're just like downloading facts without having a relationship, those kids don't do as well. And we have a whole program at the Garrison Institute where I work in New York, to try to help teachers be more present. And what our research has shown is it actually helps the kids, even if you don't do anything directly with the kids, because presence is the first stage of a developmental relationship. And then in Brainstorm, to get to the final part of this, and this really relates to the issue if you go to your hand model, if you take your hand model and realize when this brain that you now have, can they take it home? Yeah, okay, so you can take this home. So this is all available to you. And let me see if any of you have done this. When this putting this together, you are able to balance your emotions, to regulate your body, to basically attune to yourself and others. You can be flexible in your responses. You can soothe your fear. You can have insight that connects your past, present, and future. You can make a map not only of your own mind, but a mindsight map of another person's mind. You can make a mindsight map of the larger whole called a mindsight map of we, which is also called morality. And you can also have intuition, okay? That's what it means to have an integrated brain. Now think about all those things and think about your life, whether you're a parent or not. How many of you have ever flipped your lid and lost one, two, or maybe all of those things? So when I was writing Parenting from the Inside Out, thinking about the question you've asked, I noticed, wow, I had a 1-year-old at home and I was flipping my lid out, and I was a board-certified psychiatrist, a board-certified child psychiatrist, and I was a National Institute of Mental Health attachment researcher, and I was acting like a nut. So I had to, spend all those years trying to figure it out, but you can flip your lid. The point is that repair. There is no such thing as perfect parenting. So to come to your question about even adults, I've had adults read Parenting from the Inside Out who are like in their 30s or 40s and bring their parents in who are in their 60s or 70s to have family sessions to review what in the world happened back then. I'm not kidding. You're talking about courage and beautifulness. I mean, it just pulls at your heart. You realize there is repair that's possible at any time, even if it's decades later. So don't ever give up if you think, oh my God, I messed up, or my parent messed up. There's always a chance to go back. And the reason we put this in the adolescent book, there's a whole section on attachment, the Brainstorm book, is because when you give people the chance to make a repair, you can reconnect a relationship and people have the experience of belonging again. All we really want in life is to have a feeling that one of my patients a long time ago described this way. She got better in therapy. I wasn't doing anything my supervisors were telling me to do because it didn't make any sense, so I just kind of winged it, whatever, with her, and she got better for some reason. I don't know why. So at the end, I had an exit interview with her. I said, at UCLA, we do exit interviews. She goes, oh, that's so great. We didn't do them, but I did it. So she goes, oh, that's such a good idea. I said, yes. She was a UCLA graduate student. So I said, yes. She goes, what do you do at an exit interview? I said, oh, we review, what happened. She goes, oh, well, you know exactly what happened. I said, yeah, I know. But how would you put it in your own words? And she goes, never in my whole life have I ever had the experience of feeling felt by anyone until now. And that phrase, feeling felt, and I know her name, I know her, I could say all sorts of things about her, but I can't. But I would quote her because it's the most beautiful way of articulating, I think, the deepest human emotion. That's all we want, is to have our subjective experience known by another, to feel felt by them. And so that's, to answer your question, when parents have shut down and have adapted their own way of not feeling felt, then they don't provide that for their own children, And then it's just this generation after generation is what my field, attachment research, what we've shown. And you can undo that. The mind can change the way the brain is functioning and structured even, right? So if you've read the book Mindsight, you know the story of Stuart, 92. And I did this review with him of what happened when he was a little baby and what happened when he was a little kid. And he was able to undo all the ways he adapted. Yeah, so thank you for that great question. Thank you. Yes? Your use of the word integration to me was very profound. It gave me a lot of images. So the use, here comes a microphone, because I'll try to, but the use of the word integration, well, here we go. We'll have directly your words. Thank you. Thank you.
Use of the word integration to me was very meaningful, but I could think of.
Can everybody hear? No, is that on? Try it again. Here we go. Why don't you take mine? Oh, you have the, here comes yours. Thank you.
I'm not playing. All right.
Yeah, there you
Here we go. Use of the word integration is what I was talking about, and saying how meaningful that was to me. I thought of 50 applications of where that word was apropos, but I
Can you list them?
I can't.
No,
think
I
of.
actually
I
would
don't- I
love
won't
to hear
give
them,
you all
actually.
50.
You write me an email.
All right, I will.
Okay, I'm serious, actually.
But is today that really troubles me, and I'd appreciate your thoughts on maybe what we can do about the lack of civility in our society today.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for the question. And let me address the civility in just one, in just one moment. Just first of all, thank you for saying how integration relates to things. What's so fascinating about integration is the notion of linking differentiated parts comes from math. It comes from systems theory, looking at complexity theory, and it comes just from saying if the mind might be the self-organizing aspect of a complex system, that's a math term, then the way it creates harmony, basically, where it's flexible and adaptive and coherent, energized and stable, this flowing harmony between chaos and rigidity, that's all math speak for what happens when you differentiate and you link. So there's a whole ton of that stuff in this book I wrote called Mind, which has fun and just playing with that. What's really amazing about it is when you go to energy and information flow, you realize that that integration of the complex system can happen in your body. And sure enough, integration is the best predictor of health in your body. And then you look at relationships, let's say one-on-one, and the concept of integration explains the entire field of attachment. So when I met recently for a week with all my attachment colleagues about the future of attachment research, I got up there from an interpersonal neurobiology point of view, different from their perspective, and I just said, this whole thing is about one word: integration. Integration between creates integration within. And I sat down. That's the entire field of attachment research. Literally, it embraces all of their findings, including the brain findings that they usually don't talk about. So now when you talk about civility, you're talking about moving from the dyad, the pair, right, of a one-on-one relationship or even a family, and now we're talking about our larger culture. So I was just at a meeting last week for 3 days we had 8 superintendents of schools, we had 16 principals of schools from all over the country, we had a ton of other educators, and then experts in systems stuff. Peter Sangay was running it. And this notion of integration came up again and again and again. And I'll just say that there were lots of examples where, whether it was in a classroom or a school or a community, or even in this large group of our national educators there, the country, when you're seeing relational processes, sharing of energy and information flow, that is not honoring differences and promoting linkages in the form of compassionate, respectful communication, you are going to see chaos and rigidity. And so civility, I think, is a synonym for integration. And when you look at what many political leaders have said about what is the sign of a civilization, it's how we care for our most vulnerable, whether it's the young that we have, our youth, the aging, the infirm, people who are outcasts in various ways, the outgroups. The sign of a civilization is how we care for the most vulnerable. And when you see a society that's not doing that, it is not integrated, and it's prone to rigid polarization and chaotic outbursts of violence. So from an interpersonal neurobiology point of view, when you look at a planet that's doing that, not just a country, but a whole global thing. My daughter now works at the UN, and when we talk about, what's happening in different nations, these are signs of impaired integration. Now, once you kind of say that, So I'm working with different other branches, the World Health Organization, other things. Once you start applying this concept of integration at national levels, you have the opportunity to change the way policies are made. And I'll give you one little example. I was asked to go to another country and speak with the parliament officials of this country. And the person who invited me to go, had done this practice that I have that you can all do from my website called the Wheel of Awareness. And the Wheel of Awareness basically is a really simple practice. It basically says, if integration is the base of well-being, whether it's in our society or in your individual inner life, if integration is health and consciousness is needed for change, which all the research suggests that's true, for choice and change we need consciousness. Whether that's in our individual lives, our family lives, our school lives, our community lives, our country's lives, our global lives, we need consciousness. That's how we human beings evolve and grow. Okay. So then it says, okay, well, what if you put those two fundamental principles together? What if you integrated consciousness? So then you say, well, integration is differentiating, linking. You say, well, what's consciousness? Consciousness, you can differentiate the knowing of awareness. Let's put that in a hub of a metaphoric wheel, from the knowns on a rim. And so I would do this with people in my office. We have this table that looks just like that. And they started getting better over depression, anxiety, trauma. It was like weird. And so then I started doing it with my students who are therapists, and they started enjoying it. They did it with their clients, their patients. They started getting better. So then I started doing workshops, and I did systematically with 10,000 people, recorded the results. And the results are absolutely fascinating and universal no matter a person's background. And I'm bringing up all this because someone was in one of those workshops. She was in another country. She was working with the parliament. She invited me to go. So now I'm at the parliament. That's the background. So now I'm at the parliament, right? And I'm sitting there going, this is like, I can't believe I'm doing this. So I'm doing the Wheel of Awareness with these government officials. And part of what you do is you go, the first segment of the rim is like hearing, then there's seeing, then there's smelling, then there's tasting, then there's touching. Okay, no big deal, outside senses. Then you move this metaphoric spoke of attention over to the second segment. That's the interior of the body, muscles and bone sensations. And then your organs, your intestines, your lungs, your heart, stuff like that. That's called interoception in science. Okay, then you take a deep breath. Then you move the spoke over to mental activities like feelings or emotions, your mood, thoughts, intentions, hopes, dreams, longings, desires, beliefs, all that stuff. And you're just open to it. So instead of the focused attention of the first two segments, you're now in this open awareness of the third segment. And then, depending on the workshop, we then do this weird thing where you bend the spoke of attention around and aim it right into the hub. And that's where people experience awareness of awareness. Then they have that experience, and then you straighten the spoke out, and then you go to the fourth and final segment, which is your sense of relationship to other people on the planet. And it goes systematically through that, and you say positive statements toward it. That would be another workshop we could do, but that's the Wheel of Awareness workshop you could do. So we do that, and then at the end, everyone discusses what they had to experience, and then we take a break, have snacks, and had that country's snacks. It was very nice. And then some guy comes up to me at the break, and I'm eating my snack, a gluten-free snack, of course, and he goes, I didn't say anything in the discussion. And I said, yeah, I noticed you didn't say anything. And he goes, do you want to know why I didn't say anything? I said, yeah, if you want to tell me, I'd love to know why you didn't say anything. He goes, the part where we bend the spoke of attention around and we aim it into the hub? I go, yeah. He goes, I have never felt so much love before in my life. So there's this silence between us. And he goes, and you know why I couldn't say that in the discussion? I said, no, I don't know why you couldn't say it. He goes, because my colleagues would have thought of me as weak. And there's this silence between us. And I go, okay, let me make sure I understand. You experienced this intense feeling of love? He goes, oh yeah, so much love for everyone. I said, and you couldn't say it because you thought they would think you're weak? I said, yeah. I said, so you don't want to look weak? He goes, that's right. So you didn't speak? He goes, yeah. I go, okay, I understand it. And there's this silence between the two of us. We're kind of looking at each other. I go, so let me ask you a question. He goes, okay. I said, so when you're making public policy, Do you leave love out? And his eyes get really, really big. And his finger comes up and he goes, oh. And he runs over to his colleagues and starts talking a mile a minute to them. And this is the issue. Now, there's a long thing we could talk about this, but the bottom line is that hub of pure awareness, there's a long thing I could say about it in terms of the physics of that, but that's too weird to get into too briefly. But the bottom line is there's a reason to believe that awareness and love come from the same place. That when you're connecting in relationships with your presence and attunement and resonance and trust, you are dropping into this hub of awareness and you are open and receptive to the energy and information flow coming from another being. And when you open that way, that's the science of love. When you felt like that with someone else, that's what love comes from. And so integration, in terms of civility, a real civilized society is a yes-brain society that cultivates kindness, compassion, curiosity, creativity, the courage to try new things, and the courage to embrace differences, because love comes from differentiation and linkage. That's where integration arises, from this place of open, receptive awareness that's called presence. So these things all come together, and when you can give an individual like this parliamentarian, or all these parliamentarians actually, when you can give them this skill of coming away from their rim of the wheel, of all their judgments and their ideas and their particulars, and they can drop into the hub, they have a vision for how the world should be instead of being reactive to all these judgments of how the world they think is. They can create a new kind of world from this hub of awareness. And this is something we can do. And this is why it really comes to this place for all of us of starting with your inner life. And even like, let's say, the word compassion. I don't like the word self-compassion. I would rather us use the term inner compassion, so that when you're compassionate for someone else's body experience, it's part of you. It's intercompassion and inner compassion. Because yourself is a plural verb. It's not a singular noun. You are a me that lives inside of a body. No one's trying to take that away from anybody. Enjoy the body, sleep the body, all the stuff we said. That's a me. But you're equally a we. Your identity is, or can be, an integrated way of living is I'm a me and I'm a we, but how do you live an integrated life then? How do you put me and we together into one thing? Muy. M-W-E. Muy bien. Muy is the kind of life we can all live together. And together, we can make this a much more beautiful, cooperative, and connected world. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Siegel. And thank you all for sharing your evening with us. We will have a book signing in the lobby now. Thanks again.
Oh, good. Yeah, take it home. Is that good? Is that useful?